betrayed, accused, abandoned. Gianna thought she had everything: love, family, and a future. But one devastating accusation shattered her world in an instant. Kicked out, humiliated, and left with nothing, she stumbles upon a truth more painful than betrayal. The man she loved was never hers to begin with. But what happens when fate hands her a second chance? One wrapped in danger, secrets, and the arms of a powerful mafia. This is the story of heartbreak, vengeance, and a love that defies the odds. Welcome to His Puppet 1. Chapter 1. Gianna's point of view. "We've trusted the wrong woman again, grandmother," Justin said the words coldly. There was no ounce of warmth in his voice. The beautiful smile I loved on his face was nowhere to be found, and he seemed like he was a different person entirely. "What do you mean, Justin?" "It's me, Gianna. I've not changed." I cried. My fingers left the bags I held, and they all fell to the floor as I brought my hands to my chest to refer to myself. Grandma Krista and Justin were all I had. They meant the world to me. I had no one else. I was to go finish my entrepreneur program in San Francisco and come back to Justin so we could begin our wedding arrangements. "Gianna, confess the truth. Tell me whatever it is Justin thinks you're hiding. If you confess, I might find a place in my heart to forgive you," Grandma said firmly. Grandma Krista was an old woman. She was in her early 70s, yet her eyes were sharp, and she still ran the company. She was going to give it to Justin very soon. It was suspected that she was waiting for our marriage before she would give it to him. Justin was a sweet man. He was good in a lot of things, but he wasn't a very tenacious man. He wasn't so good in business. Ever since she noticed Justin's interest in me, she had brought me close and taught me many things. She encouraged and sponsored my education in business, accounting, and entrepreneurship. I loved to think she trusted me. I would never do anything to betray that trust. I have nothing to hide. I cried desperately. The suspense was killing me. What could it possibly be? All through my stay in San Francisco, I focused on my studies. Everywhere I went was with the intention of research and study. I made no friends. I knew how jealous Justin could be. I couldn't risk turning his anger against me. It seemed like I was already too late for that. His anger had already been turned against me. Justin came and pulled at my hair, forcing me to my knees while my scalp stung with the force with which he pulled. Tears began to gather in my eyes. I didn't even know my sins. "Don't you trust me? Justin, what did I do wrong?" I begged, but instead of releasing his grip, he pulled tighter. I had no choice but to plead for mercy. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I'm sorry," I begged. My head was banging like it had been hit with something very heavy. The pain tripled as Justin placed a resounding slap on my ears. It was a miracle I didn't go deaf. My eyes clouded for a moment, and all I saw was darkness. I was hearing the sounds of a siren hooting, and I heard nothing else until the noise finally faded. Justin's hands left my hair, and I could only sigh in relief. "I am disappointed in you, Gianna. I was willing to give you my name, to give you the opportunity to continue my legacy. I trusted you," Grandma Krista spat. I realized I had just admitted to my sin by apologizing. My ears hadn't recovered Justin's hit. My throat burned as the threat of bursting into tears heightened. My vocal cord lost strength and no words formed out of my mouth. It was too late to ask what I did. Now, I just have to beg. "Grandma Krista, I'm sorry. I swear, it's not what you think. I would never betray you. Give me a chance to explain." I crawled towards her. She was my hope, my light, my salvation. I didn't care much about Justin. I have to admit, I dated him and agreed to marry him just so I could be connected to Grandma Krista. All the security I had in this world was in her care. I came from a home where no one cared about me. Not my dad, not my stepmother, not my mother either, because if she did, she wouldn't have run away and left me with that ogre she had me for. Grandma Krista raised me since I was little. She sent me to school. I was who I was because of her. She was my benefactor. My sponsor. My everything. Get out of my house, Gianna. Your father was right about you. You were a daughter of your mother after all. It was like another slap in my face. My mother had run away with another man. Was Justin accusing me of cheating? I was given no chance to ask questions. Grandma Krista turned her back on me. I knew she could be more ruthless than this. That was why I had always been careful, calculating my movement, giving up my real dreams to be what she wanted me to be. My heart squeezed in my chest. Get this filth off my floor, Justin. Don't forget to wash up when you come back. With that, she cleaned her hands with her ever-white handkerchief and disposed of it in the trash can. She walked away without looking back. It was her signature move. I had seen her do it to countless people, and now it was my turn. Grandma Krista had abandoned me. I didn't even know why. Justin pulled at my hair, using it as a means to pull me after him. He kept pulling until I was totally out of the mansion. Who would have guessed you had it in you to be a slut? How did you manage? You were never good in bed. Did he lie to you? Did he say you were amazing? Justin scuffed. My self-esteem was leaving me to join the pile of hopelessness on the floor. I tried to reason with Justin. What exactly did I do? I swear. I don't know what you're talking about. I cried. He looked at me with haughty eyes as he dropped my luggage on the floor beside me, and gave me no reply, walking out. Then I heard my phone beep in my pocket. It was a picture of me in the arms of another man. Chapter 2. Gianna's point of view. The picture wasn't photoshopped. I recognized where I was. I even remembered who I was holding. But it wasn't what they thought it was. I wasn't even in his arms. I was the one holding him. I had met this man after one of my business courses when I was taking a walk downtown in San Francisco. He had been bleeding but didn't want anyone to show it. I remembered his words. He said he would lose his job if anyone found out about his injury. His mother was dying in the hospital, and he couldn't afford to stop working. He had begged that people might be watching him. Then I helped. While I held him like we were hugging, inside his coat, I was wrapping a bandage around the wound. I just had to explain to Justin. Nothing happened between that guy and me. I took a deep breath of relief. Grandma Krista wouldn't listen to me at the moment. I just needed to get to Justin. Sorry, Miss Gianna. You're no longer allowed to enter this house. O'Brien looked at me with eyes of pity. We were friends, not that we hung out or shared heart-to-heart conversations, but he was one of the few I played with and shook hands with, in this house. Our friendship is over now. I no longer belonged here. I wasn't going to give up though. I couldn't go home. I just couldn't. I could never go back to that life. How could I? I still had scars, physical and emotional, from living with my stepmom. I had only one option now. Justin and I had a secret door. It was very far behind in the mansion. It was an abandoned old door no one cared about. When Justin still cared about having sex with me, when my body had not turned ugly in his eyes, I used to go through that door to meet him. There was a little cottage where we would hang out and make love. Who knows, maybe he would be there. I could meet him there. Or I could send him a message to meet me there. I quickly picked up my phone. Meet me at the cottage in an hour. I have something very important to tell you. I typed the word rapidly. It showed a sign it had been delivered, but he hadn't seen it. Justin was never too far from his phone. He would see it before I got there. It was going to be a long walk. I couldn't leave my bags, in case everything went south. All I had in the world was in them. I hung my small purse over my neck, held my suitcase in my right hand, and pulled my travel box with my left hand. I could do this. 10 minutes after I started walking, the clouds began to get dark. The time on my phone was past 6. It was getting a bit too dark for the time. Dark clouds of rain had begun to gather. I made a quick prayer to God to delay the rain as I hastened my steps. After 20 minutes, I checked my phone to see that Justin hadn't seen my message. I didn't care if I had to wait in the cottage for days before I saw him. It was my only option. I could only pray he saw it soon. 15 minutes later, the rain began to drizzle. I tied my phone in a safety nylon inside my suitcase to keep it from getting wet. It would be disastrous if my phone got spoiled along with everything I had lost. My legs began to get weak, and my stomach churned in hunger. I didn't dare stop. If I fainted here, I would die and smell before anyone realized I was dead. The path had already been closed up, would be covered with the bush in 3 days. Grandma Krista loved the look of doom the house had as it was surrounded by forest. They did well to keep wild animals off, but people had the idea that their legs would be chopped off by lions if not crocodiles if they tried to sneak into the mansion. The rain got heavier, soaking my bags and making them and my legs heavier to lift. After another 25 minutes of sheer perseverance, I made it to the gate. I expected that it would have been covered up with bush. It's been a very long time since I came through this door. Surprisingly, it was still clean and wee-free. I saw light in the cottage, a fire had been set up. My heart soared in joy. Justin must have seen my message. Thank God. This meant he wasn't angry with me. He had to know I wouldn't cheat on him. I dragged my feet to the cottage, taking my bags out of the rain and stumbling inside to sit by the fire. Nothing would have prepared me for the sight that I met. Justin's forelimbs and lips were entangled with another woman, a woman with an all too familiar blonde hair. My stepsister, Bianca. Justin was having an affair with Bianca. I felt my legs give way beneath me as I fell to the ground. I felt cold and numb. Everything was finally falling into place. How my stepmom would insist Bianca followed me to see Grandma Krista. The stupid internship Bianca was having in the company. The dumbass knew nothing about business. All she had was her hair and no brain. The look she always shared with Justin. How Justin suddenly began to detest my short and dark hair, asking why my hair couldn't be long and blonde like Bianca's. His loss of interest in my body. It's been months since we had sex last. When had it all started? You should have seen the look on her face when I hit her. I heard Justin grunt out the words. Did they talk about me while having sex? Bianca giggled in reply. The bitch is finally out of our way. You now belong to me. You are now mine. She moaned out the words. The squeaky sound of their bodies slapping against each other filled the air, disgusting to me. I've always been yours, Bianca, Justin replied. That was the last straw. I burst into tears, my heart heavy and my breath seized like an asthmatic patient. Chapter 3. Gianna's point of view. I had no strength or boldness to face them. I pulled at my luggage and began the long way back home in the rain. The wind seemed to hate me too, blowing dust and dirt against my face. It had pushed a bush over the path I came through, making it harder for me to walk back. I begged my legs to move. They were cold and numb beneath me. I couldn't do it anymore. I was too weak to continue. My body was detached from my mind. I pushed relentlessly into the bush. I couldn't recognize the path that I had come in. I had lost my way. I couldn't do anything at that moment. Suddenly, I slipped into unconsciousness. The first words I heard when I woke up belonged to a stranger. She's awake. Thank God she's awake. I heard a male voice breathe in relief. Thank God. I heard another voice scream. This voice was female. The voice that thrived in my nightmares, this disgraceful thing should never wake up. It would be better for her if she died on that road, my stepmother, Ophelia said. Thank you for your help, mister. You are such a gentleman. Come, let me give you a little reward. I heard my father cheer. Someone had helped me. A stranger had found me, and my father was more interested in having scotch with him than checking to see my face. I had woken up into a real nightmare. I opened my eyes and looked around. They had brought me into my old room. It was a small room. It had been my room since I was 4. My mom had insisted I had overgrown the nursery and had prepared this room for me. It was so big and beautiful. I remembered how much I loved it. Now it looked small and clustered like a prison. It did not hold a good memory for me, only pain, and there was more pain to come. I walked out of it. I didn't want to be in that room at that moment. I am disappointed in you, Gianna. How could you betray Justin, after everything that family has done for you? My father began. He was just one of them. No one cared to ask what truly happened, only laying accusations. You shouldn't be, honey, Ophelia said with an evil smile. She walked up to my father and laid a hand on his back. An apple never falls far from its tree. Her words sliced my heart even more than everything I had experienced today. Father, why do you let her slander my mother like that? I cried. I would take any insult, but they should put my mother away from it. It's you, Gianna. It's you who is slandering this family. My father spat angrily. Why? Why won't you defend me for once? Why can't you ask my opinion? Ask what I think, ask if I'm hurt. For once, Father, why can't you take my side? I screamed. Raising my voice was the only way I could hold back from breaking down. My head was aching and my whole body hurt. I had not realized it till I woke up, but some trees and leaves had made cuts on my skin. The cuts weren't deep, and the blood was dry, but I was hurting everywhere. The physical pain was almost as bad as the emotional pain I was going through. I will never listen to you, Gianna, because all you bring back to me is disappointment. From the day you were born, all you brought to this home was disappointment. My father said the words bitterly before he walked out on me. I tightened my fist to bring myself under control, but all I felt was pain. My chest hurts. The door opened and Bianca walked in. I wondered if I should let her know I knew she was sleeping with Justin. I opened my mouth only to close it back. I had gone through enough pain. Words would not bring Justin back to me or make my world easier. You look like the trash can rejected you, Bianca said the words with disdain. It was a norm for her to insult me anytime she deemed fit. I could never wear the designer clothes and shoes or carry the expensive bags she carried, yet I worked harder than she would in her lifetime. I've had enough. I was tired, I didn't want to fight anymore, and I was tired of being alone. Why wouldn't anyone just hold my hands? When the unconsciousness came again, I gladly welcomed it. It was the only place I could find peace. Whenever I was within these walls, the reality was a nightmare. I had lost everything I had built in the last 6 years of my life. I had ongoing projects I was sure would turn out a success. I had plans to be finally free when I got my share of profit. I hoped I would finally be able to do the things I wanted. I had given Grandma Krista all the love I had in me, and she had walked away from me without the slightest backward glance. My heart was broken and stomped upon by Justin. I had given him my body, and my heart, and my reward had been him sleeping with my stepsister. I wasn't surprised at Bianca. This wasn't something beneath her, which was because there was nothing beneath her. She was her mother's daughter, yet no one whipped her for it. My dad had whipped me the first time I had been caught kissing a boy in high school. I never kissed another boy after that, till Justin. When Bianca had been caught in a scandal with a teacher in school, my father didn't say a word about it. I was the one made for punishment. But not in my dreams. Tonight, I dreamt I was in a tunnel. I was consumed by darkness, but suddenly, I saw light. There was light at the end of my tunnel. Waking up, I saw the whole house in an uproar, then I slumped back into the arms of oblivion. Chapter 4. Roman's point of view. Today had started very nicely. It would be fair to say I was in a good mood. First, I had found the two motherfuckers that betrayed me and got me almost killed. I got off with only a very deep knife wound in San Francisco. Things would have gotten nasty if a short lady with the prettiest eyes I've ever seen hadn't helped me out. It was fun lying to her. I couldn't even remember the story I cooked up for her. I might have fucked her if I hadn't been worried about my life. This morning, I put a bullet into the betrayer's mouth. No one messed with me. Something else made my morning awesome. I got rid of my bandages today. The wound was as deep as it was painful. But this morning, it was officially healed. At least, enough for me to get rid of the bandages and allow me to go to work. I trusted no one and let no one handle my business for me. I had a swarm of meetings to attend and documents to sign. The whole day was filled with one conference meeting to another. A bunch of people bowing down to me in fear and reverence. It used to make me feel good, but now it was becoming too boring for my taste. The company seemed to be doing fine. I did well to cross-check the figures in case someone had grown enough wings to steal from me. Unfortunately, someone had. His name was Jasper, a very foolish man. He was the one in charge of my ammunition ledger. Maybe he had seen so many guns and thought he could handle one. I put a bullet in his thighs and let him writhe in pain for an hour before calling in the doctor. I would give him 4 days to recover before resuming duty again. It was either that or I took his life. He was a bit useful. I figured he would be more useful to me alive than dead. It was 11:30 when I finally finished in the office. I stretched my shoulders and picked up my phone. 10 missed calls from Lucian. He was one of my men. I frowned at the phone. 2 weeks ago, I gave Lucian a special task, and I had not heard from him since then. I might have even forgotten I gave him a task. There was a bug beep on my phone. He had planted a bug somewhere and wanted me to listen to it. I didn't bother to call him back. I tapped into the bug. The bug meant Lucian had finally found the truth about her. She was a spy. I paid utmost attention. I knew all my enemies' voices. I would know who she worked for the moment I heard his voice. Instead, I heard the most heart-wrenching sobs, a cry that showed the pain that went deeper than the flesh or the muscle, deeper than the bone. An emotional pain. A pain born directly from the heart. I couldn't stand it. Where is she? I flew to New York like a madman. Lucian filled me in on the way. Boss, someone has a picture of you. That was a disaster. No one knew what Roman DeRico looked like. They might know Rico Roussel. The man the world knew me to be. But the man who got stabbed that day was Roman. I needed to get rid of that picture, and along the way, save the woman that had saved my life. I arrived in front of the house I now knew belonged to Gianna Marino's father. Nicholas Marino stood in front of his house like a man marking his territory. I knew how territorial men could be, so I approached carefully. "Good morning, Mr. Marino." "Who are you?" he replied as his eyes shot lasers at the men behind me. His wife had not taken her eyes off my wristwatch, and I made a mental note to be watchful of her. She looked like a woman with keen eyes. She whispered something into her husband's ear. "Come inside." He ushered me in. We sat opposite each other, two opponents accessing each other. It wasn't hard for me because I knew all there was to know about him. Including the ones he wouldn't want me or anyone else to know about. "I want Gianna." I made my claim. I wasn't one to beat around the bush. "Why? What is she to you?" Ophelia threw at me. From the look of things it would seem like she ran this household. "Why don't you excuse us?" It wasn't a question. I hated being interrupted. Her husband gave her a look and she walked out with proud shoulders. "You still have to answer the question," Nicholas Marino said as soon as his wife was out. "I put her into this mess, I could as well get her out of it." Nicholas nodded and looked away, so it was true. "She was cheating on her fiancé with you." I opened my mouth to defend her but changed my mind. It was for the best if they thought I was already in a relationship with her. What if I insist you can't have her? Her father challenged. This conversation was getting too long. I opened my phone and stretched it to him. Everyone had their big little secret. His eyes widened and his hands trembled. Let it be our little secret. I stood up and whispered into his ear. I squeezed his shoulder and walked out. I saw Lucian lazily walk in. Where is she, Lucian? He bowed before he led the way. She lay on the floor. Dried blood etched all over her seam from numerous tiny cuts. It seemed to be all over her body. Why hadn't anyone attended to her wounds? Luckily, I knew how to treat wounds very well. It was a survival skill. I carefully cleaned her up. It would hurt her too much if we bathed her wounds. I sat calmly, pressing down my anger as I waited for her to wake up. I noticed pus coming out of her ears and cleaned it up. Then went back to waiting for her to open her eyes. Finally, she did. Are you okay? How do you feel? Where do you hurt the most? I bombarded her with many questions. She didn't answer me. Instead, she looked at me with a strange look. She didn't look afraid. Then she mouthed the words, "I can't hear you." Chapter 5. Roman's point of view. What had she done to deserve so much pain? I held myself from screaming. My usual way was to give a violent reaction, but something about her compelled me to be calm. Something in her eyes made me patient. She looked like she had given up, and tried to shut out the pain. Maybe I could get her a therapist. Maybe not. Maybe it was at that moment my dark heart began to beat again. I had not felt any real emotions since I was 5 and realized the life I had been born into. I was the 5th generation of mafia men. Being weak was never and would never be an option for me. I never let myself feel. She was worried about me. She remembered me. The story I had fed her that day came rushing back. She was worried about my non-existent job while there were scars on her own back. I never believed in heaven, but now I do because I have finally met an angel. I was going to keep her. I didn't lose my job, but I heard what happened to you because of me. I said the words humbly. It seemed like the character of the person I had pretended to be that day came back to me. I couldn't help trying to be a normal guy for her. Can you hear me? She nodded. My ears hurt, but I can, a little. How's your wound? I stood up. My hands went to my shirt as I undid a few bottoms and lifted them, enough to reveal my wounds that had healed, glad that they had healed. I'm as good as new. I spoke a bit loudly, so she could hear me. A smile broke out of her face, then it was followed by a frown. She lifted her hands and touched the wound that had begun to heal. It's going to leave a scar. I hated the pain in her voice. She hated scars, yet her body was filled with them. I fought the urge to drive a punch into whosoever was responsible for hurting her so badly. It made me uncomfortable. Would you like to go to a hospital? I asked. It seemed as if I moved towards her left ear. She heard me better than when I stood by her right. No, I'm okay. You should get back to work before your boss finds out. She said worriedly. How many mornings had she woken up like she did today and continued life like nothing happened? I grew up fighting for everything I wanted. She just took the pain and ignored it like it wasn't there. Not anymore. Why do you let people treat you so badly? From everything I had seen, it seemed like her family had stomped on her all her life. Why can't you fight back? Leave this life. I asked. My anger was already bubbling to the top. I was glad I could raise my voice. It helped her to hear me better and made me feel a bit better. Because they're family. She said the words like it was an explanation for everything. I had put a gun through my father when I was 17. What if someone helps you fight back? My knuckles itched to punch the man. Tears gathered in her eyes. How can I hurt my father? My mom already hurt him enough. He never got over her betrayal. She thought she deserved the pain. I realized I would never get her consent to hurt her father, but I would, nevertheless. It was a sinister plan. It was something I had once hoped for but had lost in my dark heart. A life I used to dream of, the plan had already begun weaving itself in my mind. I knew she wouldn't fall for it even before I opened my mouth. After living in the form of hell she had been in for so long, it would be impossible for her not to want such. I ran my fingers through her hair and saw her wince, even her heart hurt. Gianna, I started by saying her name. I watched how she blinked those blue eyes that I loved as she tried to pay utmost attention to what I said. Her blue eyes were beautiful as they were teary. I don't have much, but thanks to you I still have my job. I have a small house and little money to my name. Will you trust me enough to take you away from this place? I can't give you the world, but I can promise that there will be no more pain for you, Gianna. My words seemed to shock her. More tears seemed to force their way out of her eyes as she struggled to push them back in, rapidly blinking her eyes. The tears coated her long lashes and made them stick together. She only looked more beautiful. Why? Why do you want to do that? The tears didn't stop, but she said the words with a broken voice. Because I'm in love with you. What would you do if the people you trusted the most turned their backs on you? Would you fight to clear your name, or walk away forever? Let us know in the comments. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Audio Novel Stories. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories your way. Chapter 6. Roman's point of view. It took less persuasion than I imagined to convince Gianna to come with me. As much as she loved her father and justified his actions, she was tired of the pain and sorrow that came with living with his new family. I had to paint a picture where she would feel safe and at home living with me. In the end, the person I ended up with was as far away as possible from who I really was. It was a bit hard finding a small homey place at the borders of New York. I wanted a place where she wouldn't feel detached, yet a place as far from home as possible. The perfect place turned out to be New Jersey. It seemed perfect enough. It was homey. I felt like the people there didn't know how to mind their own business, but she would be perfectly at home there. It was also the fastest place where I found someone willing to sell immediately. Welcome to my home, Gianna. The person who stayed there last was a family person. I bought the house along with everything in it. It had a set-up kitchen, laundry room, one single room, and a guest room. It was perfect. It's beautiful, she said weakly, her voice still quiet and scared. I helped her to the couch. I know that this is a hard decision for you to make, but I assure you that you will not regret it. The gentleness of my voice even amazed me. It was a different world for me, one where I didn't want to be feared. I wondered how long I would be able to keep this new life safe, keep her safe. I think I like it here, she said, smiling. I might not be around most of the time, I warned her. You know how demanding my work can be, I added. It was true. Yeah, you're scary boss. But you'll always come back, right? She said the words quietly, yet it pierced my heart. Many people would be glad if I went out and never came back. Every day one or two members of my staff betrayed me, yet this woman wanted me back. I'll always come back. I might have not realized it at that moment, but I now had a reason to stay alive. What do you want for dinner? I asked her, changing the topic. I didn't know how to handle emotional moments. I never had to. Anything works, she said, smiling. The last woman I had asked that question chose a very expensive restaurant and made a huge loop in my pocket for food she took more pictures than bites out of. We ordered chicken and sauce. I preferred it crispy, but for her, we got it soft and less spicy. She insisted we ordered it the way I liked it, but I found this feeling of caring about someone else nice. With her, I was going to explore that part of me I had kept hidden since I came to the realization of the family I had been born into. Tell me about your family, she asked randomly when we were done eating. I stilled, unable to say a word. I couldn't tell her I put a hole through my dad's heart after I found him with my mom's blood on his hands. Neither could I tell her that my only brother had not been able to stomach the lifestyle we were born into and had thrown himself into the sea. How could I tell her that my only sister was married to a man more monstrous than I was and there was nothing I could do about it? Well, you've met my dad, and it feels weird that I know nothing about you, and yet I followed you. She said, her voice was shaky like that of a wounded puppy. I'm sorry. It just feels bad to say it, but I guess you deserve to know the truth. I have no family. My parents died when I was 17 and I was the only child. It was technically not a lie. I figured the way to kill a conversation in the present and keep it from coming back in the future was to mention death. At least she wasn't going to ask for my dead sibling or parent or want to meet them. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring back such painful memories. She whimpered, bringing her hands to touch my shoulder. Then she didn't just touch it, she patted my back, from my shoulder down, and she did it slowly. The feeling was soothing even if the memories were in no way painful. I looked at my newly acquired puppy. I couldn't tell how long this charade would last, but I had the feeling that I would keep her. It's fine. I'm sure you'll need rest. Come, let me show you your room. I offered. I held her hands as I led her to the room she would be sleeping in. The earlier I tucked her in, the earlier I could go about my business. My phone would have a million messages by now. I tucked her in bed and wished her good night. I'd be in the other room if you need anything. Just knock. She nodded. Good night. I shut the door. Good night, puppy. Then I picked up my phone. As expected, there was an endless list of messages and unanswered calls. After 3 hours of attending to the most important things, Gianna, I settled on my bed. I knew I wouldn't be able to get a wink of sleep. The bed was old and bad. I would have to change it if I was going to spend nights here. Since I wouldn't be doing any sleep, I picked up my phone and dialed Lucian's number. What did you find? The picture was nothing harmful. I'm with the Miss Phone, none of the pictures show your face. At least not clearly. What's your assurance that there isn't more? There might be others that have my face shown more clearly. Find them and get rid of them. Yes, sir. Is there anything else I need to know? Well, not necessarily, but Miss Gianna's ex-fiancé was having an affair with her stepsister. She caught them, she knows about it too. I nodded at that. How about we find a way to punish them? I smiled as the most wicked idea began to weave itself in my mind. Revenge was always a sweet meal, best served hot. Chapter 7. Gianna's point of view. I woke up feeling pain all over me, yet the pain was much less than I thought it would be. It was dawn and the windows were open. On the table beside my bed, where the lamp stood, was a note, and some cash, but they were held down with a flask. I reached for the note first. I have some urgent tasks to attend to at work this morning. Use the cash to get yourself something to eat. There is a good breakfast cafe down the street. But drink the tea in the flask as soon as you wake up. Don't forget to use your meds too. Take care. I'll be back soon. I smiled as I ran my fingers over his neat handwriting. For some reason, his presence made me feel safe. With him, I felt more at home than I did even with Justin. I couldn't deny his looks appealed to me. His dark brown eyes seemed golden when I stared at him for long. His hair was always disheveled, like he couldn't keep his hands out of them. It was like that the first day I met him too. I wondered if he combed them randomly or if it was that way because he was always messing with it. I had never seen him smile, but I had a feeling it would look very nice. I understood why he was hardly smiling. The poor thing had lost his family at the age of 17. He must have been alone for a very long time. Then he had to work for a very tasking boss. Sometimes he got injured. How long had he been nursing his wounds alone? I felt bad for him. He was like me, in a way. We might find a home with each other. I stood up and took a bath. The tea was still hot because of the flask and I couldn't tell if he had been gone long or not. I smiled as I sipped the hot tea. What young man who lived by himself had a flask and drank tea these days? Justin was a coffee addict. He couldn't breathe without caffeine and I hated it. Rico was different. He was gentle and calm. He was a sweet man. I found a few female clothes folded in the cupboard. They seemed like an older woman's clothes and they were quite old. Had Rico kept his mother's clothes? They felt too sacred. The money he left was more than enough for food, so I bought a cheap second-hand gown at the market. Now that I had no job, I needed to find something else to do. I had a bit of money in my account, but my phone wasn't with me. I made a mental note to ask Rico about my phone when he got back. While walking down the street, I found a store that needed an accountant. After I showed the manager how fast I could keep records, I was hired on the spot. We had a little challenge due to my hearing. Rico had helped me realize I wasn't deaf. It seemed like one of my ears only functioned better than the other. I couldn't tell if it was from Justin's or my dad's hit, but I figured out that it could be both. We settled it by turning my desk in a way that my working ear would face him while the other would face the wall. I convinced the manager to pay me per day for the first week and we could arrange to get paid monthly later. I didn't want to be an obligation to Rico. I was grateful for his help. Unlike New York, New Jersey slept. By 5:30, every store along with ours was either closing up or preparing to close. I collected my first pay with a smile on my face. I managed to buy enough stuff to cook dinner with. I had seen an oven in the kitchen but no microwave. Rico must have been living a very healthy and conscious life. I wasn't going to spoil that for him. I had gotten every important thing I needed to cook dinner and I saw a cake in the breakfast store Rico had recommended this morning. It seemed like it was the last cake they had for sale for the day and they didn't want to leave it till the next day. It had been tagged a discount of 50%. I was almost out of money but I just couldn't help but buy it. I took a shower as soon as I got home. I couldn't use the ointment I was given because my hand couldn't reach my back and it hurt to turn. I took my meds and began cooking dinner. I tried to be as fast and efficient as I could. The kitchen was very beautiful and neat. I wanted to keep it that way for Rico. In 2 hours I was done and ready, waiting for him to arrive. I lit the candles on the cake and sat facing the door. He had promised to come back as soon as possible. I would wait. Hours flew like it was days, and I realized how much it didn't feel good to wait. There was nothing to do to while away time. I looked around the house and counted the steps from wall to wall. "It's so lonely here," I muttered to the air. "Rico, how did you manage to live such a lonely life?" I asked the air. He must have been so sad. I hugged myself with a blanket. I would be strong for him. I shouldn't play with a wounded cat waiting to be rescued. I would work hard, and make sure he wasn't lonely. Maybe find him a girlfriend. It didn't seem like he had one. Just when I was distracted with planning Rico's life and ways to make sure he lived happier than he had been living before I came into his life, I heard someone at the door. I jumped up with joy and ran to the door, pulled it open with all my might, and ignored the pain that shot through my back. But just before I could wish him a very hearty welcome, I realized the man at the door wasn't Rico. He had a harsh face, a scar snaked out of his chest, and was revealed through his neck. Fear gripped my heart. Chapter 8. Roman's point of view. I started my day with very dark coffee. My secretary knew well not to add sugar. I loved the smell of strong coffee. It was enough caffeine to keep me active for the rest of the day. It was normal for me to begin my day with 2 cups of coffee. I hardly ate a complete meal except when I had to eat brunch with potential or real business partners. It was amazing how I could live such a double life. I wondered what Gianna thought of me. Then more thoughts of her came streaming into my head, what she would do today, what she ate, how she spent her day. I imagined her sprawled in bed all day. She had lived a busy life. It was time for her to rest, smile, even add a little weight. What's on my schedule for this evening? I asked my secretary. I wanted to know if I would be able to make it tonight. Unfortunately, I was filled till midnight. The temptation to push all the meetings I could till the next day hovered over me, but I waved it away. I couldn't let one life affect the other, but the point was moot because if I didn't go back home early, this life would affect the one with Gianna. I hardened my heart and went on with my work. I wouldn't worry about Gianna too much, I told myself. When it was past 8 and dark, I was in a meeting with some men concerning ammunition. Things like this were best discussed as the day grew darker. "Excuse me, gentlemen." I stood up without waiting for a response and strolled out. I hit a button on the speed dial on my phone. "Lucian. How's Gianna keeping up?" I just needed to know if she was okay. If she was still in pain. He was quiet for some seconds before he replied with a rumbled throat, "She's okay." "Is she asleep yet?" I asked. I would feel a lot more at peace if she was asleep. "No, she's not, the lights are still on. She's not had dinner yet, sir." "I think she's waiting for you," he replied. I had asked him to continue his duty of keeping an eye out for her. It would put me at ease, yet I didn't feel at ease with his words. "I can't make it tonight. I need your help." I said it was a request and not an order. It would seem that the life I wanted with Gianna was the one that would affect my real life. What did I want from her? I kept my voice low as I rattled out orders to Lucian. I trusted him to stick to my words. "Permit my boldness, sir," Lucian asked when I was done. "What is it? Why are you doing this?" "You can just help her, give her the house, and help her start a new life." "Why do you have to involve yourself with her?" he asked. I was sure he thought my involvement with her would be her end. I only wanted a real taste of attachment. Of course, I wasn't going to tell him that. "Because I'm sure it's going to be fun," I said the words impatiently. I didn't like how I sounded. "I'm saying this as a friend. I think she's been hurt enough. I also think she would be a risk for you. A risk too big to take just for the sake of fun." I hung up the call before he could say more. Where were we, gentlemen? I smoothly sat on my seat and the meeting continued. "There was a raid that affected my boys yesterday." Greg Alonso spoke first, raising a brow at me. "Seems like your boys have been too careless or messed with the wrong guys." I shrugged, fixing my tie even if it hadn't been crooked. "2 of my boys got shot." He chipped in, this time looking me in the eye. His look was bold and accusing. I folded my fingers into each other. "Shouldn't you be finding a way to take your pound of flesh?" It was a way of life for us. We didn't forgive, and neither did we let go. The rule of the game was an eye for an eye. We managed to remove the bullets. "There were your bullets, Roman." He deadpanned. There was a way to keep track of all our actions and to catch the people who betrayed us. Each Don had their bullets marked. I even had my guns marked. Anything that came out of my stores could be identified by me if I found it in any part of the world. To make things a bit less chaotic, we made a pact never to sell ammunition to each other's enemies. I wasn't best friends with anyone at this table, but I knew Greg was a loyal guy. Loyal enough to tell me before taking any action. I want to see it. If it was true, it only meant another of my men was selling kinds of stuff behind my back and out of my account, but I wouldn't be quick to say that in front of everyone here. Greg threw an envelope at me. I caught it. It was my bullets, one of my best. "I'm sorry about your loss." It was the least I could say. If his men had been shot by this, they would have died. "I'll find who did this and hand him over to you." He stretched his hands forward and shook them with mine. "I'll be waiting." The meeting ended faster than I expected. Everyone had 1 or 2 complaints, nothing we couldn't handle. I opened the door to my private hotel room, pushing away the thoughts of going to see Gianna. Her puppy look flashed through my eyes. How she had cared about me even when she was in pain. I had to admire her thoughtfulness. It felt nice to be cared for. I had thought the feeling would be annoying or disturbing, but it wasn't. I liked it. I didn't like her, I just liked how she made me feel. I closed the door and headed out. I wanted to see her. Chapter 9. Roman's point of view. The drive back to New Jersey was long. It seemed like I had made a wrong decision by taking her so far away. The thought that it was the best for her held me back from deciding to take her elsewhere. I had assumed she would be asleep, and I was a bit surprised when I saw the lights still on. I was more surprised when I heard her voice, along with a man's voice. The predator in me slowed down. Who was in the house with her? Lucian? I slowly walked through the window and did a quick survey of the insides of the house. My breath caught when I sighted her. She was smiling very widely while Lucian was grinning ear to ear and explaining something to her. Gianna was giving him her utmost attention and Lucian seemed to be enjoying it. I didn't bring her here or send Lucian to check on her just so they could flirt with each other. Didn't Lucian say he thought my keeping her was a bad idea? I opened the door with a bang, announcing my presence. I loved how her face lit up the moment she set her eyes on me. Lucian was quickly forgotten as she ran up to me. In reflex, I opened my arms and let her smooch in for a hug. The chemistry was mutual. I thought you wouldn't make it back tonight. She mumbled into my chest. I looked ahead and saw a cake almost finished on the table. Is that why you started the party without me? I made a sad face at her. I was waiting before your friend came here and gave me the fright of my life. She said, smiling. I looked up at Lucian, giving him a look to explain what she meant, but she was quick to explain. It's fine now, he told me he was your friend and that you sent him. I begged him to stay, I wasn't comfortable staying here alone. She finished. How did he frighten you? I asked her, if Lucian was in big trouble if he caused her any form of fear. Well, his face was a bit scary and he has the most huge scar I had ever seen. She rapped in excitement. I knew of Lucian's scar very well. Women found it sexy, but it was from a knife that had almost cost him his life, tore his chest open, and slightly missed an artery. He had taken that knife from me. I trusted him with my life now. It irked me that she cried at my scars and found Lucian's manly. Why are you still awake? It's almost morning. I mumbled, rubbing my finger across her cheeks. They had color now, unlike yesterday when she looked white and pale. That's true, I have to be at work tomorrow. She said, taking her arms off me and turning back to head toward her room. I pulled her back with a frown. What do you mean, work? I asked, why would she need to work? She should be healing and resting. Gianna got a job today, she even got her day pay. She bought clothes and the cake with it. Lucian explained to me. I shot him a look that shut him up and told him to mind his business. Why do you have to work? What's wrong with the clothes I left in your room? I asked. I felt incapable that a woman would be under my care and see the need to earn her keep. It wasn't a feeling I was used to. I could get you nicer clothes if you want, I spoke, holding her hands. Gianna thought it would be improper to wear your mother's clothes, Lucian said from behind us. This time it was Gianna who gave him a death glare. It would be cruel to send him away at this time of the night. Gianna would not approve of it. Instead, I pulled her to my room for a bit of privacy. I believe you owe me an explanation, I said the word coldly. I didn't want to be cold around her, I just couldn't help it at that moment. She winced at my tone. I didn't mean to hurt you, she started, her voice switching to that puppy tone that kept attracting me to her, that tone that pulled at me and gave me the urge and instinct to take care of her. I don't want to be a burden to you, she said at last. You think I'm incapable of taking care of you? Or that I'm not man enough? I felt insulted. The words came out as a growl. No, that's not true. She said the words quickly, waving her hands in the hair. Okay, I mumbled the words, telling myself to calm down. I didn't want to scare her off. I had just begun to explore this new world. I couldn't end it even before it started. I don't want you working, I want you resting, at least till the scars on your back heal. She smiled at my words. It's not as bad as you think it is. I'm fine. She was arguing with me. I almost laughed aloud. This was the refreshing thing I wanted, wasn't it? A life different from the one I had. Because no one dared to talk back to me. I say what I want, how I want it, and everyone does it exactly how I ordered it. But here I had to argue, to convince her. Gianna, her name came out as a rumble in my throat. My hands went to her shoulder, holding her in place. Here, I would test my skills. I began with intimidation. I was a big man, and I knew, unfortunately for Gianna, she was a puppy, a little lady. I hovered over her. You're not going to work tomorrow. I said the words with all the authority I could muster. Yes, I am, she deadpanned. What? Chapter 10. Gianna's point of view. Seeing him worry about me was just too cute. All my life, people pushed me to work. When Dad realized Grandma Krista had become fond of me, he was glad to send me off there regularly, and when I was officially offered a job, he bragged about it. Grandma Krista had constantly reminded me that I was useful as long as I worked, and Justin often brought his work for me to help him sort. To see a man that wanted me to cross my two legs and do nothing felt different, the nice kind of different. Was this love? No, you won't. He argued. Why? I whined. I wanted to help, to be a support to him. Why couldn't he just accept it? Because I don't want you to, because you're still healing. He replied. It was sweet to see that someone cared about my injuries, but I'd rather he didn't take it too far. How many times do I have to tell you I'm fine before you believe me? I asked. I can't stay and do nothing. He looked into my eyes and said nothing, but he surprised me when he brought a finger up and squeezed my arm. I winced because it hurt. I should have just held it in because I had now given him a point. I frowned at him. You've proved your point. I shrugged his hand away from me and rubbed the area where it stung with my palm. My body didn't heal from bruises so quickly, but that didn't mean that I wasn't fine. I turned away from him. I'm sorry. Did it hurt so bad? He asked. I thought he was only trying to emphasize how weak I was, but when he bent over me and I looked up and met its eyes, I saw concern and worry. He pulled me to sit on the bed. Let me see. I pulled the sleeve of the top I was wearing up to my shoulder, enjoying the attention he showed me. It was no longer hurting apart from the initial sting when he squeezed my arm, but I watched as he attended to my arm. Where's the oil? He asked me. On the shelf in my room, I replied. He stood up and left. I heard him talk to Lucian but couldn't make out what he had said. He was back in less than a minute. He quietly poured the oil on his palm and rubbed them together before reaching for my arm. I took a deep breath as his skin touched me. I always attended to my wounds myself. The process hurt as badly as the injury itself. I looked at his face. He looked so serious as he massaged the round of my arm. It hurt a little, but it was nothing I couldn't handle. He had said he loved me. I wasn't sure if I believed him or not. Love wasn't something you felt out of appreciation. In my opinion, he was only grateful that I had helped him that day, and he had returned the favor even in double fold. I snapped my eyes away when he looked up at me, then murmured, "Can you help with my back too?" I had wanted to do it myself earlier, but it wasn't convenient. Are you sure? He confirmed. I nodded. I trusted him. I knew he wouldn't hurt me. I gladly lay on the bed, stretched my legs, and made myself comfortable. He lifted my top and began applying the oil. I folded my hands under my head and used them as a pillow. The oil made his hands slippery and they slipped up and down my back. He didn't apply too much pressure, just enough to make the oil make its way into my pore holes. I tried to keep the weird sounds that kept threatening to escape down my throat, but I couldn't deny the feeling of his hands on mine felt good. Maybe that was why I couldn't discern the moment when his touch changed from comforting to erotic. Or it was just in my head. His fingers were bold and strong. My mind couldn't help from wondering what they would feel like during sex. A moan escaped my throat before I could stop it. I think I'm good now, I called, asking him to stop before my thought drifted too far. I gathered myself up. Thank you very much. He must have seen that I was making to leave because he spoke up. I told Lucian he could sleep in your room. If you are not fine sleeping with me here, I could sleep on the couch. He was such a gentleman. No, that wouldn't be necessary. I raised my hand to stop him. He had been busy working all day, and I couldn't let him take the couch. Anything to make you comfortable. He smiled. I'll go take a shower. Make yourself comfortable. I watched him make his way to the bathroom, and as soon as I heard the sound of the shower, I picked up a pillow and a blanket and scrambled to the sitting room, making myself comfortable on the couch. I had assumed sleep would come immediately, and when Roman discovered I was here, he would have no choice but to let me be, but fate had other plans. It was exactly 10 minutes later when I heard his voice in the room, Gianna. He called in a way that made me squirm and fold my toes. The sound resonated from his chest before rumbling out of his throat. I loved it. I shut my eyes and covered my head with the blanket, pretending to be asleep. I know you're awake, Gianna. Stand up. He said the words like they were a threat. I couldn't keep the smile off my face, and unfortunately, he found that moment to lift the blanket off my head. Stand up, Gianna. He warned again. It was at the tip of my tongue to ask else what? Gianna. He did it again, calling my name like a threat. Then he went quiet. I tensed in anticipation of what he would do next. He took so long that I thought he had given up and gone inside. Disappointment spread like stale water in my stomach. I turned to face the other side, reminding myself that this was my choice. One moment, the blanket was flung off me, and the next moment I was in Roman's arms. He completely lifted me off the couch, carrying me bridal style. His skin was wet and his hair carried a fresh mint smell. My nostril got a whiff of peach and I went still in the shock of being in his arms. Why don't you listen to me? He asked, taking long strides into the room. I had no answer for him because my brain had chosen the moment to shut down. He was in the room in a few seconds and he lifted me in his arms to turn the key, locking the door. Then he looked into my eyes. His face was so close, his eyes, his nose, his lips. I held my breath. Why didn't you tell me you weren't okay with sleeping in my room? He asked, still looking into my eyes. I had no answer for him. My breath was caught, and my eyes were stuck on his lips. They were the most beautiful pair I had ever seen. His lower lip was smooth and pink, his upper lips were darker, a little bolder, and very seductive. I watched them as they moved and couldn't help wondering how they would feel. Something began to pull in my chest as I gasped for air. Chapter 11. Gianna's point of view. Gianna. I heard my name like he was very far away. Lust had pulled around my chest and was squeezing. Breathe, Gianna. I realized why my chest was hurting. I had held my breath for too long. I gasped and air rushed into my lungs. I crushed my lips against his before I could make up a sensible line of thought. The tips of my fingers trembled as I closed my arms around his neck. He wanted me to. Our lips fused and fumbled together. His lips were soft and gentle, wanting yet not imposing. Without giving a warning, my tongue slipped into his mouth. It must have shocked him because his arms trembled and relaxed. I almost slipped out of his hold, our lips contact broken. His arms tightened against me, holding me. Adrenaline sipped through my veins as my heart thudded in my chest. I knew I wasn't afraid. He wouldn't let me fall. With one swift move, he changed my position in his arms. Spreading my legs to go around him, I locked my legs behind him to tighten his hold. His hands slipped under my ass, holding me in place before his lips found mine again. My fingers traced over his back, tense muscles with bridled passion rumbling underneath his skin as his lips gave and took from me. His hands moved to the small of my back and squeezed. Lust blurred my vision. Even when he broke the kiss, I didn't see the look in his eyes. All I saw was how good he looked and how much I wanted him. My fingers found his shirt button. I undid the first, and the second, and I was on the third when he found his voice. No, It seemed like he broke out of a trance. He took a sharp breath, and his voice was soft. "Stop, Gianna." I was surprised. I knew he wanted me. I could feel his hardness. Why? I couldn't keep my surprise out of my voice. "You don't owe me this, Gianna. I want you, but not like this." He untangled my legs from behind me as he said the words. All the men I knew would have taken my body without thinking. They wouldn't even feel guilty because I made the first move. But this man thought of me first. Did he truly love me? His kindness was confusing me. It was too good to be true that such a nice guy would exist. He pulled away from me. I heard the door slam before I snapped back to reality. I laid down on the cold bed. Sleep seemed so far away. I was worried if the couch would be comfortable for him. I shouldn't have disagreed with him. The room smelt of him. Instead of forcing myself to sleep, I stood up and inspected the room. He was neat, his clothes perfectly folded together. It was amusing, such a lonely man. How long had he lived alone? Did he ever bring women over, or I was the first? I picked up my phone to check the time. It was almost dawn. I made a mental note to get coffee on my way back from work later in the day. Except that when morning came, after I had bathed and was ready to go get my clothes in the room, the door didn't open. Roman intended to lock me in. Was he going to lock me in? No, he wouldn't do that. I hit the door, banging it. The sound only echoed back. It sounded like the house was empty. "Roman?" I called but got no response. He couldn't have locked me in. Would he? "Roman!" I screamed again. This was getting serious. "Good morning, Gianna." A voice greeted me. It was Lucian. I sighed in relief. "Open the door, Lucian." I pleaded, "I'm almost late for work." "I'm sorry, Gianna. I'm on special orders not to open the door until you give your word to rest today." He replied in his usual mocking tone. I scoffed at his words. I wasn't one to back out of my word, and I already promised my new boss to show up at work. My fingers scanned through my hair for a pin. Keeping one in my hair was a habit even if I never used them. I would rather use a hairband than pins, but they've proven useful all through the years as my parents had the habit of locking me in. I found one, knelt in front of the door, and got into action. Because it was not my first time, I spent 5 minutes before the lock clicked open. I opened the door to see Lucian's shocked face. "Forget about me and keep watching the door," I said the words as I walked into my room to get my clothes. I returned dressed even down to my shoes. "You're not going to stop me from going to work." Lucian was standing there with his arms crossed, the surprised look still on his face. "Come on, never met a girl that can pick locks?" He laughed and replied, "Not one that looks like you." I raised a brow. "I look small?" "Pretty." A blush rose on my cheeks. I looked away. "I won't stop you from going to work, but you have to get home before Roman does." "Deal." Work was slow at the store, at least to me. Other people thought it was usual, but after working my ass off when I worked for Grandma Krista, this seemed like slacking off. They had resting time and lunchtime, and they didn't even work for long. Maybe because I wasn't swamped with work, I kept feeling like I was being watched. It was worse when I went to use the restroom. The hairs on my back rose and I couldn't help feeling scared. I came back to my seat and was about to sit when my eyes met a man opposite the street. He was dressed in all black with a face cap and a nose mask. He looked like a typical stalker. I looked away and ignored him. Why would anyone stalk me? Maybe he was stalking someone else and saw me. I settled on my seat and got back to balancing my account when I caught sight of someone else. The stalker guy had moved and was walking away in long strides, but the second person I caught sight of looked too much like Lucian. His whole body was covered, but I knew that billed well. It had given me the fright of my life last night. Something was fishy. Why was Lucian here and not at work? Chapter 12. Roman's point of view. I knew it wasn't going to be a good day. Untangling Gianna's body from where I wanted it to be was tough enough. Then I had to sit and stare at the darkness all through the night because I couldn't fucking sleep on a couch. The question that kept my eyes open all through the night was simple, yet I couldn't answer it. Why had I refused Gianna's body? I wasn't a good guy, forget all the shit I'd been acting with Gianna. I was a guy who played with women, their body was nothing more than a source of physical pleasure to me. I was a rich guy, and I had more than enough of them at my disposal. A link to find the guys that sold my ammunition had been found, so I hurried out even before dawn. It was a fucked up incident. Turned out that a few of my kinds of stuff had been stolen the month before. It collided with the period of my injury when I had met Gianna. Many had thought I wouldn't recover. As much as I had tried to hide the truth about my health, it still leaked out, and my staff didn't record the stolen ammunition, thinking it wouldn't matter after my death. Unfortunately for them, I didn't die. Now overdue investigations had to take place. The CCTV had caught only one of them. They had tampered with the obvious camera, but I did well to keep some hidden. Zoom in, I commanded. I wanted to see the guy's face. He wasn't a member of my staff. I would have recognized him if he was. I was sure he wasn't, but he looked familiar. Like I had met him before. We can't zoom any farther than this, the man said in a tight voice. He was one of my bravest staff and had been with me for a very long time. He was one of the few that could talk back at me. I squeezed his shoulder. Thanks, man. He handed me a printed copy of The Man We Found. I had a few friends that might be able to help. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Lucian. I think someone is stalking Gianna. Catch him and bring him to me. The words rumbled out of my throat. No one would ever hurt that woman, not when I hadn't sorted out what I wanted to do with her. I lost him, but I intend to investigate him. I'm sure he passed 1 or 2 street cameras. Lucian breathed. I could guess the guy gave him a tough run. Do that, I commanded. Then the question popped into my mind. Isn't Gianna in the house? Your woman can pick locks. Lucian laughed into the phone. I smiled. The woman kept surprising me at every turn. I never had any intention of locking her in. I got home to the smell of fried eggs in the hair and saw Gianna wearing an apron looking very beautiful in the kitchen. She was also a very bad liar. Guess who didn't go to work today? She said cheerfully as soon as she noticed me. I dropped my briefcase off the kitchen counter and looked up at her. Definitely not you. I replied with a small smile on my face to show that I wasn't angry. Lucian. She whined. You should know that Lucian doesn't know how to keep secrets, I informed her, at least not from me. I'm sorry. She said the words sadly. It didn't seem like she was apologizing for going to work. Last night, I shouldn't have thrown myself at you like that, and made you sleep on the couch. She said the words shyly, itching her elbows and avoiding my eyes. What would a nice guy do in situations like this? Come here, I murmured, opening my arms. She smelled of flour, sugar, and butter. A hint of vanilla made its way into my nostrils from her hair, and her soft body melted into my arms as I closed mine around her, shuffling her hair. I would have never known how fulfilling a hug could be if I hadn't met her. It was healing and soothing, the feeling was perfect. I realized why I didn't take her body. I didn't want to ruin what we had, the innocence of our friendship. I should be the one asking for your forgiveness, I replied, and the words sounded perfect in my head. Consider yourself forgiven. She curtsied as she said the words, turning back to attend to what she was cooking. The smell of something burning filled the hair. How well can you cook, Gianna? She looked back at me, confused. Not too well. Then she seemed to smell it too. Oh my God. She ran to the oven and pulled it open. Don't worry, it only started burning. It should be fine. No, it won't. She cried. She pulled the tray out of the oven. She had baked cookies. Small round-shaped cookies, and they were all burnt. They're ruined. When was the last time you tried to bake something? I asked her. With a smooth move, I whisked her to the front of the counter and placed her on the stool while I went back to clean the mess she had made. The kitchen table was filled with flour and the leftover of her dough was still on the table. "It's been a while," she answered. It had to be a very long time because she had evaded saying the real time, and I knew she hadn't forgotten. "Tell me about your life before we met." I nudged her as I began to clean up the kitchen. Cleaning up had always been my thing because I loved my privacy and didn't like dirt. First, I cleaned the table, then brought up her leftover flour to see what I could do with it. It should be enough to bake the cookies. I spent most of my time with Grandma Krista. Dad got to brag about it and was fine with it. I've never seen him talk with Grandma Krista, but it seemed like they had a form of agreement because she made me go home frequently and he was always expecting me. She started. "So, all you did was work?" I nudged her to continue as I began remixing her dough. "Basically. I was good at what I did. I could make business plans in my sleep." She said the words with a deep sigh as she shook her head and took a sip of water. "Do you like it?" I asked, pausing to see the look on her face. The question was also for me. Do I like what I do? "I'm good at it." She said it explained everything. Me too. I held my role well. None of my siblings or cousins could have done it better. I picked up a glass of water and cheered with her. A kindred soul. We were both quiet, the wind blew, and everything was at peace until the door barged open. We looked up to see Lucian bleeding from his head. Chapter 13. Gianna's point of view. "What on earth happened to you?" I screamed as I ran up to Lucian. He held a cloth up on the cut to slow the bleeding, but it didn't stop it. Roman washed his hands and came up to us. "What happened?" His voice was cold and serious. It gave me chills. He never sounded like that whenever he was talking to me. I looked up at him, but he wasn't looking at me. He had his eyes on Lucian. He cared about his friends so much. Why did their job have to be so dangerous? I had once cited a first aid box while I was in his room, and I hurried to get it. Roman was cleaning the wound when I got back. It was a cut on his forehead a little towards the left side. He was murmuring some words to Lucian but stopped as soon as I got back. There was a bowl of water beside him, and he dipped his handkerchief which he had been using to clean the wound, making the water change to red immediately. I stood there quietly and watched him as he got into action. The look on his face was serious and he never flinched even when Lucian winced in pain. "We should take him to the hospital. He needs to be stitched up." I contributed, but the men ignored me. It seemed like they were communicating in a language I didn't understand. The air was tense, and Roman muscles were taut. I got no response, but as soon as Roman was done cleaning up the wound, he began to stitch it up. He held the needle expertly. I winced for Lucian with every stitch. He got 5 stitches. I learned something new about Roman today. He knew how to treat a wound well. I wondered what work he did that he could treat a wound so expertly. Did he learn it, or it was a skill he had to pick out of necessity? They both kept looking at each other, but I knew they wanted to talk, and my presence was hindering them. "Confidential business." "I'll excuse myself," I said. They both nodded, and I made my way to my room. I folded on my bed and wondered what work they both did. I made a mental list of what I knew about what they did. First, it was confidential business. They couldn't talk about it. Second, it was dangerous. They got injuries on a regular. Third, they had a very strict boss. It seemed like they earned well. This house was nice. I didn't know if he owned or rented it, but neither would be cheap. My phone made a beeping sound. I picked it up and surprisingly it was a message from Justin. "I need to see you." That was all it said. Trust Justin never to ask for help, he commanded it. There was a time that I liked that about him, but later I realized that he was just rude and selfish, not caring about other people's feelings. He got rid of people that he didn't need and pulled them back when he needed them. Since I met Roman, such an attitude began to annoy me. Why couldn't every man be like Roman? Kind, gentle, and understanding. His hands were gentle as he worked on Lucian's wound. He was a good man. I was only scared about his job. I hoped it was not something bad. All the arrows were pointing to illegal things. I felt fingers tap at me, pulling me out of my drowsiness. I had fallen asleep thinking about Roman. Dinner's ready. Roman pulled me up, my eyes squeezed shut before I opened them back. I realized I was hungry too. He half carried me to the table and put me to sit. The whiff of finely baked cookies found its way into my nostrils, rapidly chasing sleep out of my eyes. "Hey, Lucian. How do you feel?" I asked him. He sat opposite me while Roman sat beside me. "I'm better," he said, forcing a small smile. I wished I could ask what happened, but I didn't want to push. "Here," Roman put a warm cup of tea into my hand. The heat warmed my numb fingers, rousing me awake. I took a sip. It was just as I loved it, sweet, filled with milk, and the temperature was perfect. "Open," he commanded, holding a cookie in front of my lips. I opened up and he dipped the cookie into my mouth. It was delicious. My eyes widened and I turned to him. "That's delicious. I couldn't have done it so well." He smiled slyly, trying to hide his blush. I had to laugh aloud. The man could blush. He couldn't be doing anything illegal. How could someone so cute, sweet, and handsome be walking on the other side of the law? I picked up a cookie and held it up to his lips. "Your turn." He opened up and we fed each other, laughing and playing. I felt bad for Lucian, but I was glad to see him fall asleep. He must be in so much pain. "He'll be fine," Roman nudged at me. He must have noticed the pity in my face as I stared at Lucian. "I got a text from Justin today." I told Roman I might have to check in at the company tomorrow. I had expected something like this. There were a lot of things I had going on that I doubted they could continue without me. "Why? Didn't they let you off?" he asked. I was a bit surprised he didn't ask about the details, which meant he knew. Although it was no secret that I worked there. "There are some projects I have ongoing. They might need my help to finish it," I explained. "How much do you know about their company?" Roman asked seriously. "Do you know their hidden files and secrets?" he asked again. I thought about it. There were a lot of things about them I knew, their tax evasion activities and some kinds of stuff they shouldn't be doing. "Well, I know more than I should," I said awkwardly. "Do you realize they might try to get rid of you?" Chapter 14. Roman's point of view. "I'll go with you," I said finally. "That's not necessary. They wouldn't try to kill me or anything." Gianna said the words, but I knew she wasn't sure. She knew Grandma Krista could do something like that, and it might not be her first time. "I will not let you go see those people alone. Lucian can't go with you because he's wounded, so I'll do it myself." I was serious about it. "Has Lucian been following me?" Gianna suddenly asked. I intended to deny it immediately. I didn't want her to be conscious of being followed or to bring out unnecessary fear within her. "Why? Did he get injured while following me? Did something happen to him because of me?" she rapped, looking hurt and feeling bad. "You see why I can't let you go there alone?" I said, intensifying her fear. I pulled her close. "How would I live with myself if they hurt you when I know I could have stopped it?" I loved how her breath hitched when I came too close, when I touched her or said something nice. I loved the pool of happiness that shone in her eyes whenever I said something that made her feel special. It made me feel good and she was easy to please. She surprised me by wrapping her arms around me, our second hug. Hugs were special. They did something I couldn't name to my brain, and if she continued like this, I might start craving them. "How about work? Wouldn't you go to work?" she asked finally. "I'll take a day off." And it was sealed. I would go with her. I prayed for the next day to some fast, and so it did. I bought her a nice gown and wore a suit myself. She complained about the clothes, but I insisted I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't take care of her. I brought the least of my cars to take her there and lied I borrowed it from a friend and intended to buy it secondhand. I couldn't lie to her about it every day and I needed to have a car around. We were about to go when I decided to check on Lucian before leaving the house. He had this look of disapproval on his face and I wasn't surprised. He was scared I was getting too close to Gianna. I was only glad no one was stalking her and the guy that had attacked Lucian was only after him. It was a crazy idiot who had issues with him from our last gang clash. They settled it like we always did, with blood and wounds. "You'll hurt her," he scolded. "She's trusting you already and you know you'll hurt her." Because I knew he was right and I knew that I didn't want to stop being around Gianna, I raised my shoulders and hardened my voice. "You seem to be forgetting your place. What I do with Gianna is none of your business. When did you start caring about my women?" Living together here had brought us a bit closer, but he was in no place to scold me. In the end, Gianna was just one of my women, one I decided to play with longer. That was why I didn't want to have sex with her. Then it would all be over. I went out to see her smiling face waiting for me beside the car. "What do you think about my dress?" She turned 360 degrees so I could get a full view. "Like always, you look amazingly pretty." I loved the blush that grew on her cheeks. I got into the car and started it. Things looked too suspicious about this Krista person. I wanted to meet her. Thankfully we were meeting in the house and not the company. It would be easier to know the kind of person they were if I wanted to get revenge for Gianna. I wanted to. We played music on our way there. Surprisingly, she didn't like love or romantic songs as I thought she would. Instead, she preferred jazz. I stared at her as she closed her eyes and sang along. We had a bit of inconvenience entering the place, but when Gianna insisted that she wouldn't go in without me, they opened the gates and let us in. The first thing I noticed about the old woman was her eyes. They were strangely familiar. I made a mental note to dwell on that later. I had met a lot of people lately, but I was sure that eyes were worth remembering, or else I would have forgotten them. Gianna bowed to the woman like they were still on good terms. I expected her to come here with a stiff back considering how brutally they had hauled her out. "Good afternoon, Ma," Gianna greeted. I could see on her face that she was struggling to act cool. I should have noticed it earlier. This woman had a strong hold on Gianna. I wasn't sure if Gianna realized it or not, but the old woman did. And I was sure she had every intention of using it. Not under my watch. "What are you doing in my house?" the woman asked, surprising us both. "Justin called for me," Gianna stuttered. "And you brought the bastard you're cheating on him with," the old woman spat out. One of the things I wanted to confirm was confirmed. They recognized me. The woman had sharp eyes. Gianna opened her mouth to deny it, but I knew it was pointless, so I stopped her. "I'm sure you know your grandson isn't so innocent either," I retorted. Her eyes were sharp enough for her to know her grandson was messing around with Gianna's stepsister. Just right on time, Justin came in, and right by his side was Bianca. Their hands were tangled together. As soon as Gianna saw them, she linked her hands to mine. I kept my smile off my lips. I was proud of her, but something else caught my attention. This Justin guy. I knew him. I recognized him. This was just the beginning of Gianna's story. But what comes next will leave you speechless. Will she find justice, or will the past drag her down even further? His puppet 2 is on the way, so subscribe now and turn on the notification bell to be the first to know. And don't forget to share this video so others can enjoy this gripping story too. See you in the next video.